Hi everyone, and welcome to the Double Stuff Podcast, where we're sort of double the hosts, maybe double the topics,
but it's definitely double the fun.
Yeah. And I'm Charity.
And I'm Sarah.
By simple deduction, the other one is Sarah.
I know, it's so hard, isn't it?
So obviously, as I mentioned at the end of our previous episode, whenever we talk about TV shows and movies, we always have to do a second one. We can never finish it in one.
It's hard to talk about something so broad in only 20 to 25 minutes.
That's true. So today we are going to continue our discussion on British comedies, which ones we like and why we like them. Mm-hmm. I know last week we briefly discussed the two Ronnies, which that's sort of where I come in. So I know you talked about Morecambe and Wise and Cannon and Ball. Mm-hmm. And then I want to say it was 2012 or so, you introduced me to the two Ronnies.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, because I think I was in college. The two Ronnies is like a lot of the other double acts of that time for British comedies. I know last week you talked about how you can see yourself, or you made a connection with the British comedies. And I think I did that with the two Ronnies because a lot of what they do is the different plays on words.
Oh, I love wordplay.
And like limericks and, rhyming words and stuff. And I think we've even seen in this podcast with some of the scripts that I've written, I've done like some rhyming ones and some wordplay and stuff. So that's kind of, my sense of humor. People have pointed out to both of us that we have a pretty extensive vocabulary. We like to use big words on a regular basis, or different or unique
different words, yeah.
And so, they do so well at that. One thing you talked about was, or I think we both talked about, was the idea of classic vaudeville. And in comedy, you typically have the straight man and the comic. The two Ronnies very often would switch. So it wasn't like, Ronnie Corbett was always the straight man and Ronnie Barker was always the comic. It just depended on the script and the sketch that they were doing. And then there was other times where both of them were kind of straight faced and they were both doing a joke. So some of their musical numbers, which I love so much.
The Aldershot Brass Ensemble.
Yes, and that's another clever thing of using a song and putting clever words to it. I generally like British comedy. I think when I look at it, I kind of look at it through the lens of, maybe of a writer, script writer. And so I appreciate the cleverness of it. So like when I watch Morecambe and Wise, I'm like, oh, that was a good joke. But I'm not necessarily rolling on the floor laughing at every single thing. It is funny. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like with the two Ronnies, I'm rolling on the floor laughing. Like I've got tears rolling down my eyes. I love it. I'll watch it more than once.
Oh yeah. Such good stuff.
And so the two Ronnies is where I connected with. And I know you brought up, in the two Ronnies, where Ronnie Corbett sits in his chair and does a monologue and tells a story. You've kind of compared that to some of our chats where I'm maybe not telling a story. To be honest, it's mostly complaining, but it's still a story nonetheless. And so, I'm talking about something, as you said, the angrier I get, the more sarcastic I get, which is probably the funnier I get. So there's some similarities between the two of maybe me and Ronnie Corbett.
Well, and I like, honestly, Corbett's like, I call it sit down stand up, which is basically kind of what it is. That's actually one of my favorites.
It's sort of like Dave Allen, he's not British, he's Irish.
He's Irish, but
we can put him in the same category.
I think that's why I got into Dave Allen so much, because I really enjoyed Ronnie Corbett's sit down. And see, for Dave Allen, his is very different. And also, we've done a lot of double acts and stuff, but like some of the single acts, Dave Allen for sure. I mean, he did have like vignettes and stuff where he would do like sketches and stuff with actors and performers, but
which
for
is
the most
sort of
part,
like almost Benny Hill style in some of the things that he did.
It kind of has some of that feel, but it's also pretty cleverly done as well. Mm-hmm. What I like about comedy is the storytelling. Maybe that's part of the reason why I like Ronnie Corbett's sit down, because he's just talking. There's nothing there. There's no elaborate set. It's him and a chair talking to the audience. And
give us a cheer for Murphy.
Hip hip hooray! Dave Allen reference, guys. I think that's another reason why I do like Dave Allen and so many others. The minimalism of it. It's all based on what they can do, and you can't rely on a lot of props, or the light has to shine a certain way or something like that, and stuff like that really impresses me.
I do like a lot of Dave Allen's stuff when he got older and he looked like John Sylvester White,
Mr. Woodman from Welcome Back, Kotter.
Welcome Back, Kotter, yeah, because it was basically just an old grumpy man that was like rambling about all the things that annoyed him. If Harrison Ford were funny and Irish and told jokes.
Oh, Harrison Ford would totally be an older Dave Allen. Yeah, 100%. So Harrison Ford, I don't know if you know who Dave Allen is, but...
Google it. Go on YouTube.
You'll like it.
Now, we've talked a lot about double acts, but if we move towards the Carry On film series.
Oh, Carry On.
That was, what was that? Maybe 8-10 people? They had some guest stars, but they had regulars.
They had a lot of regulars. Yeah, probably about maybe 8 to 10 regulars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say I'm always impressed with ensemble casts.
You have to have that balance. Of who's going to be the star in this scene.
Yeah, because they all work together well, but they are very different in their delivery or facial expressions or height differences and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you do have to be aware of that, and to write it into there again, clever. We've talked a whole lot about the performers, but props to the writers, because you have to write that dialogue. And stuff like that impresses me so much. It's
kind of similar to Rabbit Trail a little bit, to the Goes Wrong show. It's a group of people, basically, same people, kind of same personalities, and similar to the Carry On series, some of the stuff that happens on the program, because it's supposed to go wrong, is completely outrageous of the things that they do, the things that they say, and,
It's so absurd.
Yeah. And so that's kind of a similar, comparison to those shows of having a full cast. So you're not dependent on the straight man and the comic of just two people. Depending on the script, at some point, this guy's a straight man and this guy's the comic, or this girl, and then it switches up, sometimes throughout the same sketch. Like when you're doing the Goes Wrong show, there's always like the stupid one and then the one who's like super macho, but sometimes they'll switch it up. So like if a chair breaks, whoever sat in the chair and broke it, well, now he's the stupid one, and so they have to kind of bumble along. Going back to the Carry On films, some of the stuff that they did in the series could be considered outrageous. I think one of our favorites is the Carry On Doctor.
I think a lot of people are probably unanimous in this. I think what makes a lot of those movies is Kenneth Williams. Like, the guy was just a genius in his comedy.
Which, to continue with the British comedy, he was on a lot of episodes of Just a Minute.
Yeah, which we attempt to do every anniversary season.
Yeah, usually like incorrectly, but funny nonetheless. But extending that British comedy, he's able to do a plethora of things.
Yeah, Kenneth Williams, Sid James with his dirty old man laugh. It's perfect. Like, it's hard to replicate. Like, you can't miss him. You got Barbara Windsor. Hattie Jakes, which I like her. She's like the no-nonsense woman, but she does it so well. It's a great cast. Jim Dale, which I believe he's the only one alive of the main cast. But man, it's perfect. And they did about 30 films, I think.
Who's the lady that was in As Time Goes By? She was Lionel's stepmother.
Oh gosh,
the blonde one, the really cute one.
Oh, Joan Sims?
Yeah.
Joan Sims. Oh, yeah. She was a staple as well. Oh, man. Like, this is part of the reason why I wish there was a time machine. I would go back in time and meet, or at least maybe be on set while they're performing those scenes. Like, I would love to see them perform what are considered iconic scenes, like to see Lucy do Vitamita Vegemin, or to see Dave Allen do one of his routines, or the two Ronnies or Morecambe and Wise. Like, just to witness that would be amazing, to be honest, And I know in last week's episode you were talking about Cabin Pressure, and when you were listening to it, that inspired you to write and actually want to produce shows like that. And for me, and then you also mentioned the same thing with the two Ronnies with wordplay. Actually, with me listening to the two Ronnies, that actually inspired me to write clever wordplay to go with songs. I didn't really start doing
Which
that.
we've
until I
done a
listened to the
little
two
bit
Ronnies.
of that here on the podcast.
Yeah.
With like our Arbor Day song, which we both wrote.
Oh,
and then
God. Yeah.
I did the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
There was a Christmas one I had written. We hadn't performed it. It was something I wrote about 10 years ago, around the time I started listening to the two Ronnies.
Okay. Well, maybe stay tuned.
So
maybe
we'll do
we
it.
can convince Alan and Dan to sing your Christmas song.
Oh, we'll see how that goes. But like she said, stay tuned. You never know. But in terms of like writing comedy and stuff, like I've always wanted to do it. A group that we hadn't talked about yet, kind of a double act, but also partly ensemble, I guess it kind of works, was Beyond the Fringe, which was with Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, Alan Bennett, Jonathan Miller.
And for those who don't know,
good.
if you've seen Princess Bride, marriage.
Yeah,
marriage is what brings us together today.
Yeah, that was Peter Cook.
Yeah, which, so don't tell me you don't know, because everyone has seen Princess Bride. So
Or
you
even
at
if you
least have-
hadn't, you know that line.
you at least know that reference.
Yeah.
So
So, but yeah,
continue to give our younger viewers some context.
But when he did Beyond the Fringe, like I said, what I said before is that I liked the minimalism of it because it was basically just them on stage. There really wasn't a lot of props. They were just on stage doing various routines.
Almost
and
like the
stuff.
Honeymooners, because the Honeymooners was
yeah.
very minimalist. It was just, dependent on the dialogue and the acting for being funny. But like some episodes, you would just be in the Cramden's apartment, and that was it.
The whole show took
The whole
place
show,
there.
yeah.
So, and that's like the birth of like sitcoms, Man, I need to rewatch The Honeymooners. I think it'd be even more funnier now than last time I watched it. That's another thing, like what Charity was saying. You kind of let some stuff ferment for a little while.
Ferment. I like fermented comedy.
Fermented comedy. Pull it out of the vat. Oh, this is still good. No, but Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, they were the ones that I was like, I think I can actually do this. Charity was talking about the Bethlehem sketch. So this is something they did later called Behind the Fridge, which is very similar. And I think they were in Australia when he did this show. But it's just Pete and Dud just sitting on a practically empty stage and they're dressed in, biblical outfits.
Shepherds.
Yeah, and so Dudley Moore's character, I think he's Matthew, he's interviewing a shepherd, which is Peter Cook, about the birth of Jesus, which is really pretty funny, and he's interviewing it.
I would say go YouTube it, because I feel like we could talk about it and it would be a bit underwhelming, but you have to watch it and just pay attention to the clever dialogue. I think that's something people would enjoy.
That's a good point. If we want people, there's certain things people should watch to get into certain ones. What you think would be the quintessential stuff for the stuff that we've discussed?
Oh, shoot. This might turn to a third episode. Okay. For Faulty Towers, we mentioned Faulty Towers. The corpse episode.
Kipper and the Corpse.
Kipper and the Corpse.
That was the very first episode I ever watched, and is still the funniest one, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that was a good one, which, if I'm not mistaken, there's an episode of Cabin Pressure. I think it's the third episode.
Oh,
where,
yeah, that's kind of similar.
Where someone on the plane, spoiler alert, someone on the plane dies. Not exactly like Faulty Towers, but they're trying to figure out what to do with the body. Mm-hmm. And I think Mr. Lehman is his name in Faulty Towers. I think John Finnemore used that name in his episode.
Oh, did he? It's been a while.
I would have to go back and confirm, but I think that's where that connection was. So it's kind of like paying homage to that. Yeah. For Faulty Towers, the Kipper and the Corpse. For
the two Ronnies.
For the two Ronnies, there's two different things. So they would do their regular sketches, and then they would do like their musical numbers, and then Ronnie Barker would do his sit down talky stuff.
Well, Ronnie Corbett would do that.
Corbett, yes.
But Ronnie Barker would do like funny monologues with wordplay too.
So I would say for the two Ronnies, if you're watching a sketch, the first one that I just found funny, the round of drinks.
Round of drinks.
Okay, so that was the first one that I found hilarious, and I think the main thing that was funny was the ending, because it's so British, but because it's just that outrageous ending. So that's the one that made me laugh. That's what I would go with. But if you're going with one of the musical numbers, and we already talked about the Aldershot brass band.
Oh, the brass band.
We talked about Carry On Doctor, which is the one that we probably liked for the Carry On series.
Oh, and Carry On Camping.
Carry On Camping, I think, is a little more famous. I think most people know that one.
I think Carry On Doctor and Camping are probably the two like quintessential.
Does he have the bra popping off scene?
Ooh, matron, take him away.
And so, okay, so what are your episodes for Morecambe and Wise and for Cannon and Ball? I like the Boom Ooh Yata Tata.
Okay, yes. Early Morecambe and Wise,
I think that's a good generic one because sometimes British humor doesn't translate well in America. I think that's a good generic, like almost classic comedy in that style. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you can't not understand that. It's very simple.
It's very simple.
Oh, this is funny. Yeah.
I think the one that they're most known for that everybody knows is the breakfast sketch. They're eating breakfast, and so they're listening to the radio, and then David Rose's orchestration of The Stripper comes on, and apparently they're just fixing breakfast to the rhythm and to the beat of the stripper. It's a weird pairing, but it works. It just works for them.
Didn't Cannonball, not to music, but you showed me a sketch that they did where they weren't talking, but I think they were moving a cup or something.
Oh, okay.
Because that sketch, they didn't really say anything.
They didn't talk much on that one either.
Near the end where he was getting annoyed.
Yeah, I think that is the season finale episode. I think it's like series 3 or series 4. It's the final episode of that series.
You guys hear this? This is what she does with our podcast. She'd be like, oh, that was season 10, episode 3, the chicken and the orange, when Dan said. I'm like, how do you remember all this stuff?
Yeah, I think, I want to say series 4 or something. Anyway, episode 6, because he only did 6 episodes per season. They're not really talking much. Tommy Cannon and Bobby Ball, they're sitting on the couch, reading the newspaper. Bobby is smoking a cigarette, and instead of flicking the ash in the ashtray, he keeps putting it in Tommy's coffee. A cup of coffee. So he keeps trying to direct him to the ashtray, and he keeps putting it in the coffee. Mm-hmm. And so that whole routine is very good.
Which is kind of Three Stooges because they were painting that table or that piano.
Oh, that was Tassels in the Air. Yeah.
See, she does it again. And he dipped his paintbrush in
the coffee.
Yeah, instead of the paint.
Yeah, no, he ate the paintbrush and he dipped the sandwich in the paint.
Oh,
and yeah. So they did it multiple times.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of similar to that, but yeah. I know we're getting close on time, and I'm going to try to keep this within one episode. But before we end, I think we need to talk about 2 others that we hadn't talked about much yet. One of them we both like, and this is a game show, Would I Lie to You?
It's a great, ridiculous game show that I think it's been tried here in the U.S., but it's totally not the same.
I thought they reintroduced something like maybe a year or 2 ago.
Did they?
I don't have cable, so I don't know whatever happened to it.
Whatever it is, fails in comparison. You have to watch the British version.
Well, because you need David Mitchell and Lee Mack.
Yeah, you got to have the 2 of them.
If they're not on it, I'm not watching.
It's not funny without them because you have. I call David Mitchell like the pessimistic comedian, because everything he does always seems to be but it's like depressing, but like in a funny way, He's like a realist, and then Lee Mack seems to be the opposite. But see, Lee Mack, he's a big fan of Morecambe and Wise. On his TV show, Bobby Ball was one of the characters on his show, so he definitely has that style of the old school comedy.
And Ronnie Corbett, before he passed, he was on a couple episodes of What I Lie to You, because Rob Brydon always does impersonations of him. He's like, I'm doing Ronnie Corbett, and that was a terrible accent.
Actually, Rob Brydon, he's a good host too. But yeah,
it's a very good balance. And
it's
then,
perfect.
Whoever they get as some of their guests, or returning guests, they're just a good balance of, telling lies.
Yeah. I made the mistake of discovering them after I got home from the hospital. It hurt to laugh, but man, it was so funny.
That was like when I had my surgery and we ended up watching Whose Line?
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Yeah, and I'm like, I literally have like the stitches down my stomach, and I'm like, I'm like cry laughing because I'm like, it hurts, but it's funny.
This has been about 20 years ago, so I was just a kid, but I did that to my mom one time. She had just gotten home from the hospital having stitches, and yes. I don't know why. But there was a variety show, again, talking about comedy, called The Flip Wilson Show, and they had this duo. And
Slow Talkers of America.
The Slow Talkers of America. And that's another one you need to look up on YouTube.
Yes,
absolutely
if
hilarious.
we try to talk about it, it's not funny. So look it up.
Look it up. And
Flip Wilson Show, Slow talkers of America.
Yeah, and you'll understand why I showed that to my mom, and she had just gotten her stitches, and she was laughing in pain. It was absolutely hilarious. Like the whole thing about leaving them in stitches, and I'm like, oh man, there's an odd bit of truth to that, and you have to you only experience that after being in the hospital. Actually, I watched Three Stooges while I actually was in ICU, and I watched Disorder in the Court. Another episode for you guys to check out. So the scene when Larry takes the bubble gum and he does the Tarzan yell. And like, again, it hurt to laugh, and I was all chewed up, and I was like, you know, and the nurses were coming in because they thought I was crying with pain. I'm like, sorry, I'm watching the Three Stooges.
Confiscate your phone. You got the nursing staff thinking that you're miserable.
So, but I guess the moral of the story is comedy is funny. And laugh with a British accent or something like that.
But before we close, I can't close it out without talking about a show that I'm rewatching once again.
Oh.
And that's Miranda. It's funny too because they're kind of all connected. So I mean, Miranda's been on Would I Lie to You? Mm-hmm. She worked with Lee Mack in...
Was it Not Going Out?
Yes. She worked with Ronnie Corbett.
And she got to talk to Eddie Braben, who was the writer from Workman Wives.
Yeah, so they're all kind of connected in various ways. But I discovered Miranda back in maybe 2014, I think. And you know, I think every generation has one of those like, not coming of age, but one of those, you know, shows you can relate to that it's about a 30-something living life. Yeah. And that's kind of what Miranda is. Her episodes are full of just different awkward moments. Some of them, you know, made by her because sometimes she's sort of an awkward person. There's a lot that I can relate to in trying to figure out life when, you know, you're not a kid anymore, but you don't necessarily feel like an older adult, you know, and you're like, what am I doing
What
right
am
now?
I?
And I was like, oh, this is nice, you know. So
yeah, such fun.
Such fun. Yes, and for those who are fans of Lucifer, you'll know Tom Ellis.
Oh, yes.
From the show. He's also in Miranda playing the love interest, Gary. So anyway, they're all connected and, you know, one big happy British comedy family, but this is just like the tip of the iceberg for us.
Yeah, so hopefully we, as very much American girls, hopefully we did it justice. So hopefully that works to our advantage for the people across the pond. We probably should revisit it with Dan and Alan and see what
what their, you know,
and that gives us
are.
And that'll give us an excuse to talk about it again.
So maybe there will be a third episode. So this is really fun. It's always fun getting a chance to talk about something you're passionate about. Tell our listeners how they can find us online.
All right, well, you guys know how the thing works by now. You can binge listen to all of our episodes at doublestuffpod.com. We're also available on all the various podcast platforms. You can also check us out on social media at Facebook and Instagram and YouTube at Double Stuff Podcast. And of course on something called Twitter, maybe, at Double Stuff
Or the X, whichever
works. One of the other platform.
The letter X, not as in your ex-boyfriend.
At Double Stuff P. And that's the letter P.